Kuril Islands represent one of Russia's many outer-defensive outposts, either outside its contiguous borders, as in the case of Kaliningrad, national borders, Armenia, Tajikistan for example, and even the Eurasian continental landmass, Novaya Zemlya, and of course the Kurils. Each of them plays a specific role in the larger defensive and deterrent posture, and each has its own peculiarities. The Kurils are not an exception. For starters, they are still something of a contested territory, since Japan has continuously laid a claim to them ever since the end of World War II that did not conclude with the Russia-Japan peace treaty that might have addressed their final status. Nevertheless, there is zero possibility these islands will ever return to Japan. First of all, the example of NATO expansion in Europe has made it plain that any Russian real estate for pieces of paper deal is a really bad idea, since the US and US allied states have shown a pattern of ignoring their commitments as soon as an opportunity presents itself. There is no indication that anyone in the Kremlin would want to relearn that lesson, and there doesn't appear to be anything tangible that Tokyo could offer Moscow to offset the loss of the Kurils, which are more important to Russia's security than to Japan's. Kuril Islands collectively represent a barrier separating Pacific Ocean from the Sea of Okhotsk. Therefore, Japan's control over the archipelago would in effect bottle up the Russian Pacific Fleet and undermine the Pacific-based submarine strategic deterrent. Even though Japan claims only the southernmost islands of the chain, such as Iturup and Kunashir, in practice there is no guarantee against future Japanese claims against other islands in the chain for similar historic reasons, which would be now bolstered by the precedent of Iturup's and Kunashir's return to Japanese sovereignty. The fact that Japan has joined the US-led economic restrictive measures against Russia naturally meant a Russian response, not only in the economic realm but also a military one. Kuril Islands, which are protected by the 18th Machine Gun Artillery Division with some 3,500 troops, have had their status elevated as part of both the response to Japanese economic pressure on Russia and to the US pivot towards Asia, which, though chiefly aimed at China, nevertheless potentially threatens Russian interests too. For these reasons, the Kuril Islands are undergoing a transformation in economic realm in order to raise their usefulness to the Russian economy as a whole, but military one as well, so that, if need be, they can resist a concerted Japanese and/or US effort to seize it through a surprise coup de main attack and serve as a platform for force projection into the Pacific Ocean, where Russian aeronaval forces will be able to render assistance to China in its own territorial disputes with Japan, US, Philippines over the status of South China Sea islands. These upgrades include the reorganization of the 18th Division, re-equipping it with upgraded weapons system, assigning a tank battalion on a permanent basis, and placing Panzer, Tor, and Buk air defense systems, while providing infrastructure for the S-400 to be deployed there in times of crisis. The air component of the island's garrison will include Ka-52K naval attack helicopters, originally ordered for the Mistral ships, which will be based on the Kamchatka Peninsula and deployed to the islands on a rotational basis. There are no indications at the moment the islands would have permanently based fixed-wings aircraft, as the islands are within range of land-based long-range fighters, and any aircraft based on the Kurils will be vulnerable to a surprise attack due to the inability to disperse them to secondary airfields. The garrison will, however, include batteries of land-based anti-ship missiles, including Bal and Bastion systems, the latter armed with supersonic Onyx missiles. Apart from their military significance, these preparations are intended to send Tokyo a message that, should it be interested in a peace treaty with Moscow, that treaty ought to be signed sooner rather than later, when the island's military capabilities become truly formidable, and that in any event no Russia-Japan accord will include any redrawing of international borders.
If the Russian Aerospace Forces' performance took NATO by surprise, it is because earlier Russian operations did not suggest that level of ability. Russian aviation took serious losses in the 2008 conflict with Georgia. 7 aircraft shot down, including a Tu-22M bomber, 4 damaged, or 1 lost per each 17 combat missions. There was practically no new aircraft procurement since 1994. Russian aircrews flew far fewer hours than their NATO counterparts. But the Georgia conflict served as a wake-up call and led to reforms which proved both crucial and successful. Russian air power was reduced in numbers and reorganized into 8 air bases, each supporting several air groups based on individual airfields, which allowed individual pilots to get more flying time. In 2012, the air bases and air groups were renamed divisions and regiments. Starting with 2012, new and modernized aircraft began to enter service in large numbers. By 2014 and 2015, Russian air forces were receiving 100 new or thoroughly modernized aircraft a year, and that pace is expected to continue in 2016. By 2020, the Russian Aerospace Defense Forces, VKS, are expected to have at their disposal about 1,500 mostly modern combat aircraft, including 130 heavy bombers, such as the Tu-160, Tu-95MS, and Tu-22M, over 800 fighters, and over 500 tactical bombers and attack aircraft. These reforms led to the Russian VKS demonstrating a number of capabilities which seemed beyond its reach only 7 years earlier. The ability to deploy and sustain a force of 100 combat aircraft for several months in difficult conditions, and the ability to sustain a high rate of combat missions. The ability to function in a reconnaissance strike complex mode, which enables intelligence data obtained by a variety of sources, including aircraft, satellites, drones, and agents, to be converted into targeting data to allow even mobile targets, such as enemy mobile troop or supply columns, to be quickly targeted. The ability to conduct close air support, as well as battlefield interdiction and suppression against an enemy practiced in concealment. The ability to operate in any weather conditions at any time of day. The ability to use precision-guided munitions. The ability to integrate long-range aerial early warning aircraft such as the A-50 and intelligence and ground surveillance aircraft such as the IL-20 and Tu-214R into the overall concept of operations. The ability to use drones on a large scale and as part of an integrated aerial operation. Granted, the picture is not perfect. Here is what Russian air power has not demonstrated in Syria: the ability to organize and operate large aerial strike packages against sophisticated aerial and anti-aircraft defenses. To be sure, while US and some NATO forces may have had that ability a decade ago, it has been degraded by NATO air power being used in Afghanistan and Iraq. The ability to use large numbers or a large variety of precision-guided munitions. Russian aircraft did use many satellite-guided CAB-500R bombs and Kh-29L laser-guided missiles, but most of the munitions dropped were unguided bombs and aerial rockets, aided by sophisticated onboard digital ballistic computers, which allowed them to strike their targets with a fair degree of accuracy. Russia does not have tactical standoff munitions like the SDB or AASM or the JASSM tactical cruise missile. Such weapons are in development and have been shown at MAX 2015, but they will not be in service for years. On the other hand, perhaps there is a silver lining in this, because Russia is not over-reliant on satellite navigation systems to the same extent as NATO is, which might well experience a shock once it tries to use such weapons against opponents more sophisticated than the Taliban. The maturity of some of the most modern aerial systems which entered service only very recently. The Su-30SM, Su-35S and Su-34 do appear to have at least minimum operational capabilities, as their performance in Syria did not give reason to doubt their performance. At the same time, the conflict did not push them to the edge of their performance, as most of the missions were performed equally well by the much older, though upgraded Su-24 bombers. Russian aircraft in Syria did not include the Mi-28N or Ka-52 attack helicopters, which raises questions about the degree of their operational maturity. However, nothing suggests these aircraft are failures, in the same sense as the F-35, for example. Everything suggests that the Russian VKS will not rest on their laurels, but instead will continue to build on their strengths and eliminate weaknesses, so that it will be an even more capable force in the next conflict it has to fight.
When the troops of the First Baltic Front, under the command of General Ivan Bagramian, captured the city of Königsberg from the Wehrmacht, they probably had no idea that less than half a century later, the city and region of Kaliningrad would be Russia's westernmost outpost, cut off from Russia's mainland and bordering with two member states of a hostile NATO military alliance. This peculiar position means that Kaliningrad plays an important role in the relationship between Russia and the West. Should the relations between the two deteriorate to the point of military confrontation, Kaliningrad region would play a crucial role. Indeed, following the outbreak of the war in Ukraine and the reunification of Crimea with Russia, Polish media ran several stories discussing a possible campaign by the Polish army against Russian forces based in Kaliningrad. Media coverage in other Western countries has sought to portray Russia's naval and air operations on and over the Baltic Sea as somehow illegitimate, which also suggests that public opinion is being prepared for potential NATO military action against the enclave. The strengthening of NATO's military presence in the Baltic states, ostensibly to defend these countries against Russian aggression, has the actual effect of threatening a military isolation of Kaliningrad and reducing Russia's ability to defend that part of its territory. Further complicating the situation is the fact that the only overland route between Russia's mainland and Kaliningrad region that does not lead through a NATO country is through Belarus, whose government could also become the target of a Western-inspired colored revolution. It is also not difficult to imagine the West adopting a packet of unilateral economic sanctions targeting Kaliningrad, following the example of sanctions leveled against Crimea. Which naturally leads one to ask, why is Kaliningrad of such importance and what forces are available for its defense? The Kaliningrad Defensive Region, which is organizationally part of the Russian Western Military District, houses the headquarters of the Baltic Fleet and is the site of Russia's only naval base on the Baltic Sea that never becomes icebound, in contrast to the more northern bases in the Gulf of Finland, such as Kronstadt or St. Petersburg. It is also the home of the Yantar shipyard, one of Russia's main shipbuilding facilities, capable of constructing large surface ships. It is the site of Voronezh DM missile launch early warning radar, which provides coverage of most of Europe. Even more importantly, Kaliningrad can serve as the launch pad for Iskander-M ballistic missiles and Caliber cruise missiles, as well as tactical aircraft, which can reach the proposed US-Euro ABM sites planned for Eastern Europe and attack infrastructure, such as railroad junctions, airports, and seaports, needed by NATO to deploy its forces, which makes Kaliningrad an important part of Russia's conventional deterrence posture. For that reason, should the Russia-West confrontation continue, we can expect the forces assigned to the Kaliningrad defensive region to increase. While no Iskander-M units are based there permanently, a missile brigade equipped with Tochka-U short-range missiles is. Russia did conduct a temporary deployment of Iskanders to Kaliningrad in May 2015 as part of a military exercise. While there are no Caliber-equipped ships currently assigned to the Baltic Fleet, there are now plans to construct a series of light frigates armed with such missiles. And when Defense Minister Shoigu announced the formation of 3 new ground forces divisions in the Western Military District, sources close to the ministry stated one of them would be stationed in Kaliningrad. Currently, only a single motorized rifle brigade is stationed there, and a naval infantry brigade that is approximately at 25% strength, supported by a fighter aviation regiment, an S-300 air defense regiment, and helicopter units. Will we see the transformation of Kaliningrad into a major militarized outpost similar to Crimea, bristling with missile batteries and defended by a powerful land force? A lot depends on the future of Russia-Western relations. It appears that the prospect of reinforcing Crimea is being used as a bargaining chip to induce NATO and the US to enter into negotiations with Russia on a new security framework for Central Europe, to replace the one that was shattered due to NATO's expansion eastward and the attempts to bring Ukraine into NATO. For that reason, the state of Kaliningrad's defenses is the barometer of Russia-West relations as much as Crimea is.